Hello, my amazing people, and welcome back to my channel if you're back. But if you're new, hello, hi, welcome. I am Shayna, and I have another case for you all today. Just my usual disclaimer, this is all information that I have found online and compiled into a video for educational purposes. And I'm gonna jump right in, but before I start, I just wanna let you guys know that this case is very near and dear to me. I've been working on it for some time now, and I'm just looking forward to everyone learning about Jeremey Joyner, who is the man that I will be telling you all about today. His case is very unfortunate and there's a lot that we don't know, but I was hoping to at least make sure as many people know about him as possible. Be sure to share this video with a loved one, and let's make sure that we keep Jeremey's name out there so that hopefully there will be a resolution to his still unsolved case. Thank you so very much, and without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The city of Bradenton is located in Manatee County on the western side of Florida, just south of Tampa. And while it's technically called a city, you can think of Bradenton as a town. It's smaller than most cities that you'd actually think of or may be familiar with. It has a very beautiful beach and shoreline, and it has both city-like and suburban areas to it. People who live here are generally well acquainted with one another, and word in the area, let's just say, travels fast because pretty much everyone knows each other. This city would become the birthplace of a man named Jeremey Joyner. Jeremey was born on July 9th, 1981, and grew up in a big family alongside 6 siblings. He actually had 3 brothers and 3 sisters growing up, so his childhood was busy and interactive, and growing up he was always a really happy kid. He had an extremely close relationship with his mother, who was a lovely woman named Laverne. Jeremey and Laverne had the mother-son relationship that many of us imagine when we hear the word mama's boy. He loved cracking jokes with his mom. He loved cracking jokes on his mom, and they would just laugh for hours together. Whenever Laverne would cook, she would make sure that Jeremey always got a plate. Even if he wasn't there at the house when she cooked dinner, she would make sure that some way he got his plate to take back with him. And when I say a plate, I'm not talking about a regular plate of food. She would literally pack food into a whole pot and take the pot off the stove and make sure that he got the entire thing. One thing about Jeremey was that he loved to eat, especially if his mom was cooking. Jeremey and his mom adored each other, and one thing was for certain was that they always had each other's backs. And Jeremey was really protective of his mom. At any cost, he would do anything that he could to protect her. And she was always so proud to be his mother. Jeremey's passing probably affected Laverne at the deepest level of all involved, which we will talk about later in the video. Aside from his mother, Jeremey had a few other very prominent relationships in his life. First and foremost, he was a father. He had a son. He always got along well with his siblings, of course. His niece was like a daughter to him, and he had cousins that he was always very close to as well. As I tell you more about who he was, you'll start to understand that he was really the easiest person in the world to get along with. So people really loved him, and people flocked to him naturally. The best word to describe Jeremey is selfless. He was the type of man, and even from a young age, from when he was a boy, he was the type of person who everyone felt like they could depend on. He was people's go-to, whether someone needed him for a listening ear and some advice, or whether someone needed some cash when they were in a bind. He was always the person who wouldn't hesitate to extend himself to help someone else, and giving back was truly just a part of who he was at his core. Something that a lot of people didn't know about Jeremey was that he oftentimes throughout the course of his days would go and spend time with the elderly. So he would take time out of his busy schedule to sit down with an elderly stranger for a conversation. He enjoyed just exchanging words with everyone, but he especially liked to speak with the elderly. He didn't mind giving them a hand in case they needed anything and just keeping them company for a while. He was always thoughtful, and he was always thinking of how he could make the next person's day better. Jeremey loved taking trips out to Tampa, which was about an hour drive away from where he lived in Bradenton. And on any random day, you might find him just hopping in his car and taking a ride up to Tampa. Sometimes he would go with a friend or a family member, or sometimes he would just opt to go alone. But outside of his trips to Tampa, one of his favorite things to do in general was take long drives. He would use long drives as a way to clear his head, to enjoy some alone time, or he would opt to pick up one of his family members and bring them along for his drives. He just liked being on the move, and getting out for long drives is one of the ways that he could do this. Another thing about Jeremey is that he was extremely spontaneous. Like, if he saw something that he wanted to do, he was that person who would go and buy tickets right away. He would find a way to make sure he did that thing. An example of this is the time that he went skydiving. I mean, I know I would be way too afraid to go skydiving myself, but that just gives you an idea of the type of person he was. He wasn't afraid to be adventurous and try new things and explore the world. He loved exploring and just getting out there and having fun. Traveling was something that he loved doing, and one of his favorite places was Hawaii. He would have taken the time to see the entire world if he could have. He absolutely loved to travel. A reason that people felt so comfortable around Jeremey was that he had a way of making people feel really good about themselves. He had an encouraging energy, and if you went to him and talked to him about maybe an idea you had or a goal that you had, he would be that person who would cheer you on, who would tell you, you can do it, you can chase your dreams, and you can make the things that you want to do a reality. So people just enjoyed being in his energy because he was a very, like I said, encouraging person, and made you feel like you could really accomplish anything that you wanted to do. He was also one of the funniest people you would ever come across, constantly cracking jokes. And if you were having a bad day, there was no moping around with Jeremey. If you were in a bad mood or you were going through something, he was going to put a smile on your face whether you wanted him to or not. That's just the type of man he was. He was extremely funny, always smiling, always joking, and just had a beautiful, beautiful spirit. In May of 2018, Jeremey was in the process of planning a small trip out of town with one of his cousins who lived about an hour away from Bradenton in Pinellas County. And the two of them were just gonna go away for a little bit of time. This cousin in particular is someone who is very close to Jeremey. They are kind of like siblings. They have a really tight relationship. But before making his way out to Pinellas County, Jeremey let his cousin know that he had to make a stop in Bradenton, and then after he handled some business back over there, he would start to make his way out to Pinellas County so that the two could meet and then subsequently take whatever trip that they were planning together. The cousin let Jeremey know that that was no problem, and he started to wait for Jeremey to get back to him or just show up at his house. And he noticed that that day started to pass and the evening came and there was no sign of Jeremey. He hadn't texted or called and he hadn't showed up. So the cousin wasn't sure really what was going on, but he knew the type of person that Jeremey was, in the sense that Jeremey was very busy. He was often pulled in many different directions. So for him to cancel plans last minute was actually not uncommon. And while he loved spending time with his family and friends, Jeremey also had an introverted side to him. So he had this side where he felt like he needed to just be alone for a couple of days or take time to himself. And this time, he's in his mid-30s, so no one really thinks anything if they can't reach him for a few days. He is obviously a grown man. He is very responsible. He is like that person that everyone looks at kind of like a big brother figure, and also kind of thinks of in a way like, if anyone's going to be okay, it's Jeremey. Jeremey is the protector. So many people never even fathomed the idea that he could be in a troubling situation, just because of that fatherly kind of energy and protective energy that he had for everyone else and for himself. He was a very careful man. He was very specific about the people that he chose to keep in his life. And If he didn't trust you, he didn't keep you around at all. I say all of that to say that it makes complete sense that Jeremy's cousin didn't worry when he hadn't heard from him that night. And the cousin just thought, okay, no problem. I'm sure I'll talk to him in the next couple of days and maybe we can reschedule or whatever the case may be. But everyone's antennas went up when Jeremy hadn't shown up to take one of his family members to a doctor's appointment that had been previously scheduled. And this was out of his character. There hadn't been a time before where Jeremy left someone who depended on him hanging. Other members in the family began speaking with each other and piecing together that none of them had really heard from Jeremy for quite some time by this point, and worry started to set in. So for this reason, family went ahead and reported him missing on May 25th of 2018. Jeremy's loved ones began searching for him, and panic kind of started to set in for everyone, especially his mother, Laverne. She was worried sick, and she felt in her heart with her mother's intuition that something was terribly wrong. What compounded the pain for her was the fact that one of Jeremy's brothers, Dariel, had actually passed away in 2005 after a tragic motorcycle accident. And she had never truly recovered from this loss. The pain that she felt from losing a son was still with her. So when another one of her boys appeared to be in trouble, the pain that she felt was magnified tenfold. Loved ones passed out flyers in Bradenton and St. Petersburg, which is located in Pinellas County, where Jeremy was supposed to be meeting his cousin on the day that he was last heard from. And they were doing everything that they could to spread awareness. They didn't want to leave any stone unturned. They were just spreading the word, trying to make sure that people were keeping an eye out and asking if people had heard anything or seen anything that was out of the ordinary. They also had a candlelight vigil in the months after Jeremy's disappearance, and they vowed to never give up the search for him and figure out what happened. Police considered Jeremy's disappearance to be suspicious in nature, but they really didn't have much to go on when he initially went missing, and it seemed like he just vanished into thin air. But the first major discovery came in June of 2018 when Jeremy's vehicle was found parked at a church in Bradenton on the 600 block of MLK Boulevard. And this discovery confused everyone because Jeremy wasn't a member of this church. But something that's important to note is that his family does have ties to several churches in the surrounding area. Inside of the vehicle, police found his cell phone and an unopened bottle of Coke. A search of his phone was conducted, and this had everyone hopeful that maybe some important information could possibly be found to lead the search in a more defined direction. But unfortunately, a search of the phone offered no new information of who Jeremy was with that night or where exactly he went. His car was taken into evidence, but as far as we know, police have not found any evidence inside the car to help in the investigation. And Jeremy actually had a couple different vehicles that he owned, all of which were located and searched. The other vehicles that he owned weren't in suspicious locations. The only one in a weird place was the vehicle found at the church, and the others were left in places that he would normally keep them, so they weren't out of the ordinary. Hearing that his phone was left in the vehicle might not strike you as odd, but his phone being left behind in his vehicle solidified in everyone's mind that knew him that something was terribly wrong here, because Jeremy always had his phone glued to his hand, in his pocket, on his person in some way. So for him to leave his phone behind, there had to be something amiss, because he would literally never be caught without his phone. Jeremy had a ton of important work information within this cell phone, so his family and friends knew if his phone is not with him, Jeremy is in trouble. And not only is he most likely in trouble, but someone else is most likely involved in why Jeremy has disappeared. Police were able to narrow down some of Jeremy's movements on the day he went missing, which was good. There is a bridge that connects Bradenton to Pinellas County, which is called the Skyway Bridge. And he would have had to cross this bridge to get to his cousin that he was scheduled to meet with back on that day in May of 2018. Police were able to catch on the toll cameras that Jeremy crossed this bridge heading toward Bradenton, back to where he's from, and it was confirmed that this driver was in fact Jeremy. He had his window down far enough to be visible on the cameras. So police were able to confirm that this was him, and they were also able to confirm via cell phone records that at this time his phone was turned on. But not long after, his vehicle was seen again, this time driving back over the bridge toward Pinellas County where his cousin was located. This time though, the window on the driver's side was rolled up, so the driver could not be clearly seen. And at the same time, his phone was turned off. Given that we know he told his cousin that he had to go to Bradenton and take care of some business over there, his movements over the bridge toward Bradenton seemed normal. That seemed to make sense. But him driving back over the bridge toward his cousin, never making it to his cousin, and his phone being turned off were very out of the ordinary. So a question that is posed in my mind is, did someone do something to him after he got back to Bradenton and then drive his vehicle across the bridge to Pinellas County? Is that what happened? If not, then why would his phone be turned off if he knew that he needed to communicate with his cousin about them getting together? You see what I'm saying? His family really wondered if the driver coming back across the bridge toward Pinellas County was not Jeremey, and I can't help but wonder the same exact thing. But this information, this toll camera footage, was pretty much all that police could find. There was no new information coming in, no tips coming in from the public, and it seemed like the investigation was at a standstill. Police in Manatee County announced a $5,000 reward for anyone who could come forward and help in the investigation of finding Jeremey, of solving his disappearance. And his family was absolutely heartbroken. It was hard enough that Jeremey was gone at this point, but the pain was just made so much worse because they had no idea what happened to him. He was the light for everyone. I mean, people depended on him in a literal sense, but also in intangible ways. He kept everyone afloat. He made everyone smile. He was the one person that people knew that they could call when they had a bad day. Losing Jeremey cut so much deeper than any loss that any of them could have ever imagined. They lost a family member. They lost their favorite comedian, their biggest cheerleader, and their absolute best friend. And it appeared that there were no answers. One thing on everyone's mind though was that whoever made Jeremey disappear was close to him. Jeremey would not have given anyone that he didn't trust the opportunity to get close to him. So the only likely explanation was that someone he knew and someone he trusted was involved in making him disappear. In April of 2019, Jeremey's family's hearts broke when they got the call from police that remains had been found. But the call didn't go how you might expect. It actually made the entire situation even more tumultuous for them than it already had to be and sent them on an emotional roller coaster. Police first called the family and told them that remains were found, but that the remains were not Jeremey's. So in some ways, the family, they weren't really sure what to think, but maybe relieved that this wasn't his body. But police called shortly thereafter to then turn around and tell the family that these same remains that they were first referring to and said were not Jeremey actually were Jeremey. And the family was thinking, okay, why is there confusion? Like, why was there a definite no and now it's a definite yes? And they started to feel even more like they could not trust what the police were saying, because how do you get that one so wrong? How can you switch it up like that, right? That's what the family was thinking. And they're like, how do we know for certain that this is actually Jeremey if you don't even know if it's Jeremey with absolute certainty? Another factor that made the family feel uncomfortable was they found out these remains in question had been found in October of 2018, which is an entire 6 months before police publicly reported that they were the remains of Jeremey Joyner. So there were so many questions. Where was he found? Why did so much time pass before the police called? How was his life taken? It was just, there was so much to take in all at once. And when the time came for his mother to go and look at his remains, it was heartbreaking. Since so much time had passed, his skeletal remains were basically all that were left. Visually identifying him was impossible for the family, but those who did have the chance to go and take a look at his body felt that there was a chance that this was not their Jeremy. His teeth didn't look how his family remembered, and the uncertainty of the back and forth from the police certainly didn't help put their minds at ease. But with no other option than to take the police's word for it, they accepted this to be the remains of their beloved Jeremy and began planning a service for him before laying him in his final resting place. Police determined his manner of death to be homicide. However, asking for further details about it led the family nowhere. Police did, however, tell the family where he was found. According to them, his remains were found by a landowner on their property in a small town called Rabonia, which is located within Manatee County, about 15 minutes from Bradenton. This town isn't part of the census, so exact information on demographics and population size is unclear. But we know for sure that it's a very tiny area and that people only go to Rabonia if they're familiar with other people who live there. This town, Rabonia, is significant to the family as older generations of Joyners actually lived in this area over the years. So this made people feel even more sure that if these remains in fact belonged to Jeremy, whoever was involved in his disappearance had to have known him and been close to him in the family. This person would have known how deserted Rabonia was and how easy it would have been to go undetected in this town. They also would have known that a body could go a long time without being found there. Because whoever made Jeremy disappear had this knowledge, forensic evidence was largely destroyed as his body was compromised so much by the elements and therefore unable to help us find out who did this to him. And remember, I mentioned to you that his car was found at a church and his family has ties to churches in the area. His vehicle being left at this church was viewed by some as a taunt that whoever put this car at the church knew how tight Jeremy was with his mother, Laverne, who was a devout Christian. There was no other logical explanation for leaving it out in the open at a church. They could have abandoned it somewhere else, much harder to find, but whoever moved this car chose to leave it at a church, which felt like a slap in the face to the family. Police were initially very forthcoming with the family when they would call and ask questions or try to get information, but over the years, they have become less and less forthcoming. They have said that they have continued to investigate though, and we know that they conducted interviews at a time, and apparently there are about 2 to 3 persons of interest still in the case. We just have to talk about it again. One thing about Jeremy was that he would not have been caught slipping. That is for certain. He was a very careful person. He valued his safety and his privacy and having a group of trustworthy people around him. So that is why, in my mind, it appears that whoever was involved had to have known him. Jeremy was a hardworking man, and even though he didn't live a flashy life, people around him knew that he was successful. And if there is one thing that is for certain, it's that jealousy is a very sinister thing. Could someone have hurt him because they knew how successful he was, or maybe they were jealous that he was so loved by everyone around him? I can't help but also talk about the fact that the family has so much doubt about whether the remains were actually his. The way that they were notified of these remains being found was really unsettling for them. The fact that his teeth, the remains had teeth that didn't resemble the way they remembered Jeremy's teeth to be, calls into question, were these actually his remains? These skeletal remains, were they actually his? Is it possible that he made the decision to disappear on his own? Since there were no signs of foul play within the vehicle that we know of at this point, is it possible that he just up and left? If that's the case, why wouldn't he communicate with his loved ones? Why wouldn't he call his mom and tell his mom what was happening? There's so many questions, and I hate situations where there are so many more questions than answers, but this is definitely one of them. All I know is that there are way too many strange circumstances for me to think that Jeremy is still out there and okay. And while it is always possible, it seems very unlikely. Unfortunately, you kind of have no choice but then to take the police's word for it that whoever analyzed his remains was correct in saying that that was Jeremy. So then the question becomes, who did this? Why would someone want to hurt him? It does seem like it's taking way too long for police to solve this, and we don't even know with certain clarity that police are still working diligently on the case. The 4-year anniversary of Jeremy's disappearance is coming up. We are in the month of May, and he went missing in May of 2018. And it's very frustrating because we still have so few answers. If you are out there and you do have information, I implore you to come forward. Jeremy's family deserves answers. They deserve closure. They deserve knowledge of what happened to him, who would have wanted to hurt him. And Jeremey deserves justice, first and foremost. Since Jeremey passed away, his mother actually also passed on, and she never got to see a resolution in her son's case. Some believe that she really died of a broken heart after losing 2 of her sons, but there are people in the family who have pledged to never give up. They have said that if those remains definitely were Jeremey, they will work until they figure out who did this and get justice for him. No questions asked. I will have phone numbers of who you can contact with information in the description box of this video if you have anything that could possibly be helpful in this case. The lack of tips is just hard to think about, because there are other cases where tips are pouring in, and there's cases like Jeremy's where there are so few, when there had to have been someone who saw something that day. I will have information again in the description box for you. Remember that you can always submit information anonymously. I'm hoping that at the very least, by making this video, it will urge someone to come forward to police to tell the truth. That it'll urge someone to think twice about keeping something to themselves if they do have information. Share this video, and if you live in the Florida area, be sure to tell your loved ones about this case. There's always the possibility that someone unknowingly saw him that day, and you never know. I'm just hoping that this video might help the family in some way, shape, or form. If you just want to make a recommendation on larger channels, be sure to put Jeremey Joyner's name in there, in that pool of options, because larger content creators have a farther reach than I do. So there is a possibility that another channel that can reach more ears might cover his story. So also, if you have the time, please be sure to recommend Jeremy's case. I extend my deepest condolences to the family and to the loved ones of Jeremey Joyner, and I am hoping for a resolution in his case sooner than later. This one is hard because we just know so little. I would just really like to see a resolution. We've seen cases go on for years and eventually get solved decades later. We're still within 5 years of Jeremy's disappearance, so there is still ample time to review forensic evidence to find an answer. I truly wonder if the police just really are working on this as diligently as they could. I don't know. There's no way to know for sure. They say that they are, but they really aren't communicating with the family what they know, if there's any new information, so we don't know. But that is where I am going to leave you today. Be sure to let me know your thoughts about this case in the comment section below. And remember to share Jeremy's story with people around you and encourage other content creators to potentially share his story as well. All right, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope that life is treating you good. I know that I've been kind of MIA, so I appreciate your patience. And you know that I love you guys, and I'm happy to be back. Without further ado, you know what I'm gonna say. If you made it this far, you are loyal. You really are, and I appreciate you. I look forward to seeing you in the next one, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Take care. Peace.